Yeah, everything looks good on your end.
Liza. Okay. All right.
Yep. All right. Welcome to the Jimmy Duster Music Channel. Here with my friend, the incorrigible Luddite from out on the West Coast, Seattle way. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for joining us tonight. As always, comment. We love hearing your comments. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We got an interesting show this week. We each took a little different approach on it. Too bad Shannon can't join us this week. He had an approach. He was going to talk about we're talking about our favorite debut albums of all time. And you and I kind of approached it a little different. I think it'll give us some variety. And Shannon was going to do his top 5 favorites since 2000, debut since 2000, which, was certainly going to help me out because I don't know a lot of post 2000 music, although I do have one in my honorable mentions tonight. So, Mr. Luddite, why don't you kick us off? Tell us, we're going to go through all 5 of yours. Just tell us your 5 and why they're in your top 5 countdown. Now, remember, these are our favorites. So you might not see like the Beatles debut in here, which obviously is, one of the greatest debuts of all time. You may not see some of the things that people consider critically the greatest albums of our time, but these are albums that have meaning to us for whatever reason. So kick us off and tell us your 5.
Okay, I'm going to start out. My number 5 is going to be Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. The debut with Syd Barrett, one of the founding members, as the guitar player and principal songwriter. There's a couple reasons I put Piper at the Gates of Dawn number 5. When I think of psychedelic rock, this is the record that I think of. There's a couple other artists coming up who often are lumped into psychedelia, which they are, but this to me really defines psychedelia. And they would only grow from here. They would take a different route when David Gilmour would actually become the guitar player of the band. But at the very start, there's like a very much a whimsical, childlike fairy tale vibe to this album, which I really appreciate. There's also some spacey explorations, which you'll get with later Pink Floyd stuff, like Astronomy Domini, and also, of course, Interstellar Overdrive. Then you've got Bike, which is a terrific pop song, quirky, idiosyncratic, childish. And you've also got Lucifer Sam, which is just a terrific song with almost like a surf kind of a rock feel. But I think everything that Pink Floyd ever did, it definitely can be traced back to this record, and that's why it's my number 5. Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. My number 4 is going to be Roxy Music debut, self-titled Roxy Music. Hope you can all see that okay. Now, that is actually Carrie Ann Mueller on the cover. She would later marry Chris Jagger, the younger brother of Mick Jagger. Little tidbit. What's interesting about that, of course, is on a later Roxy Music album cover, the 5th Roxy Music record, Siren, Jerry Hall is on the cover.
Married Mick Jagger.
She dated Brian Ferry, right? She dated Brian Ferry, but then later she would marry Mick Jagger. So I think it worked out okay for Brian Ferry in the end, but little interesting tidbit there. So there's always this weird association between Roxy Music and the Rolling Stones. But I got this number 4. This is a really influential record that a lot of people still don't know about. Now, their absolute, best album ever, and to me, the best album of the 70s is the next one, For Your Pleasure. But this one's still a 10 out of 10 for me. It really combines progressive rock. It's got a bit of pastiche in it. It's got a little bit of old-time rock and roll in it. It looks forward, looks back a little bit at the same time. It's got a lot of art rock in it. Maybe even some hard rock elements, and it puts it all together. And this album is all over the place. It's not as cohesive as the next one, but they're definitely doing something different. Already incorporating some sounds from German krautrock bands like Can on this record, but they're great songs on this record. You've got a Remake, Remodel, If There Is Something, which almost has like a blues kind of a vibe to it at the beginning until it goes into the spacier realm. Also, the Bob medley, which starts out in a very spacey, atmospheric kind of way. Sea Breezes, beautiful. It's going to be later covered by someone even better in 1987. And also Ladytron, who the electronic band Ladytron, who's I think still out there now, took their name from it. Great track, but I'm going with Roxy Music, self-titled number 4. Number 3. You all know the cover designed by Andy Warhol, The Velvet Underground and Nico. I'm quoting, or I'm not quoting, I'm paraphrasing Brian Eno, who was part of Roxy Music on my last pick. This probably, when it comes down to it, is the most influential of my 5 picks. Eno once stated that everyone who listened to this record, despite the fact that it didn't sell well at all in its time, started a band. That's what Eno said, and that's probably true. This record is hard to categorize. It's an art rock record, no doubt about it. It's got psychedelia in it. It's got a lot of dissonance, kind of an atonal vibe to it, almost like some of the free jazz stuff, like by Sun Ra and John Coltrane and stuff like that. Lou Reed is a great poet. It's also got the addition of Nico on it, of course. But there's really great songs all over the record. It might be the first true art rock record. And, you've got Waiting for the Man, which is a terrific song. It's in a lot of ways, it kind of predicts things that bands like Jane's Addiction and Guns N' Roses would write about much, much later, the seedy side of life. But, it's a great track. Also, All Tomorrow's Parties with Nico on vocals there. Absolutely terrific. Femme Fatale. So Heroin, which is a harrowing song on this record. Again, kind of pointing, the Velvet Underground doing things that other people aren't talking about at the time. Very taboo. But most of all is Venus and Furs. Venus and Furs is a really hypnotic track. It's my favorite track on the record, one of my favorite tracks of all time. Just has a really hypnotic vibe to it. So, yeah, my number 3, based upon influence and all other factors involved, it's got to be the Velvet Underground and Nico.
That was my first one out. Velvet Underground and Nico. So it's definitely on my honorable mentions, but a great choice. And there's another song on there. Oh, you talked about Venus and Furs. Yeah, that's a great song.
That's one of my favorite songs of all time.
And Sunday Morning.
Yeah. It's loaded with great songs. Like, there aren't many songs on the record I don't like. Actually, the only track on the record that I'm really probably not fond of is probably the Black Angels Death Song. Every other track on the record is really good. And it easily could have been in my top 2. But my top 2 are just too strong. And I had to deliberate about 1 and 2 on this because it is so close. Both albums have a lot in common. Just like Velvet Underground and Nico, these 2 records were also released in 1967. They were both much more popular than the Velvet Underground and Nico. These records were world shakers, and in their own way, they were massively influential. They may not have had everyone start a band like the Velvet Underground and Nico, but just very popular records, but also very groundbreaking, seismic. Okay. I'm picking right now on the fly because I could not pick, but in the end, I'm going with the Doors debut number 2, self-titled record by the Doors. You all know this record. I mean, it's just loaded with great songs. This record was way ahead of its time. It mixes a lot of different styles, including psychedelia. I mean, overall, it's not as psychedelic as the Pink Floyd record. But it is quite psychedelic, but it also mixes blues rock, show tunes, very creepy ballads and epics. Kind of mixes all these styles together and comes up with something really cohesive. But if you look at the track list on here, I mean, it starts out with a bang with Break On Through. Soul Kitchen is kind of funky. Crystal Ship is a gorgeous song. 20th Century Fox, terrific. Alabama Song is like a show tune kind of a thing. It's fantastic. The weakest song on the first side is the most popular song, and that's Light My Fire. That's the weakest song on the whole first side of the record, in my humble opinion. You get to side 2, you've got Backdoor Man, which is a Willie Dixon cover, and it's probably the best blues cover I've ever heard. I mean, a lot of people like the Led Zeppelin blues covers. I'm taking the way the Doors do the blues. Backdoor Man is absolutely vicious, their take on it, and it's quite original. The only weak links on this record are on side 2, and they're I Looked at You and Take It As It Comes. But the third and fifth songs on side 2 are probably my two favorite songs of the record, and that's End of the Night, inspired by Louis Ferdinand Celine's Journey to the End of the Night, which is another creepy ballad with great guitar work by Robbie Krieger. And, of course, it's going to end with the epic, the controversial epic, The End, which was light years ahead of its time. My number 2, The Doors debut.
Another one that's on my honorable mentions, I was just looking back at my notes from when we did the show on the Doors, and I did have that ranked as my number 1 in the Doors catalog. And I put them in my honorable mentions, but when you hear how I do it, I could have included them in my top 5. Great choice. Great choice. And I even said, I remember saying from that show that side A of that is a perfect album side.
Yeah, it really is. Light My Fire is the weakest song on the first side.
Yeah.
For me. But side B is no slouch. I mean, with The End, End of the Night, and that Backdoor Man cover is vicious. I suggest.
I actually like the two that you don't.
Those are my least favorite songs of the record. Take It As It Comes, and the other one are the weak points. But that is such a strong record. It's packed with great songs.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I had to go with Are You Experienced number 1. Jimi Hendrix has the highest batting average ever of any artist. Jimi Hendrix Experience, I should say. 3 albums. All 3 are certified masterpieces. There's no doubt about it. Anyone who doesn't think so, they need to recheck their hearing. Unfortunately, Jimmy only had 3 records with the Experience. They're all masterpieces. This is not necessarily my favorite. It's not. Axis Bolt of Love is actually my favorite. But you talk about a groundbreaking record. I mean, the Doors record, I don't know which is more groundbreaking between the two. It's hard to say. For guitar players, obviously this one was. Jimi Hendrix is the greatest guitar player who ever existed. The reason why, it's not because of his technical ability. It's because he mixed the abstract with the technical in a way that no technical player has ever done. He played like he was playing from the skies, all right? End of story. No one else plays like this guy. None of his influences, none of his contemporaries. End of story. He's the greatest. Now, with that being said, the songs on this record are incredible. It opens up with Purple Haze. Goes into Manic Depression, a great hard rocker. Hey Joe, we all know and love that song. Love or Confusion is probably my least favorite song on the record. Then we go into May This Be Love, which is beautiful. I Don't Live Today is great. The only weak song on side 1 is Love or Confusion. Side 2 is probably stronger than side 1 with The Wind Cries Mary. Fire. Who doesn't love Fire? Come on. Third Stone from the Sun. Foxy Lady. And then finally, the trippy, very trippy backward guitar motifs in the title track, Are You Experienced? It had to be my number 1. It's very close between this and the Doors debut, but I am going with Are You Experienced number 1. Just the most explosive of these debuts, and that's why I put it number 1.
Great choices. Like I said, a couple of those were my first ones out, and including the Jimi Hendrix album. And once you hear how I kind of designed my albums tonight, because I'm with you. I like Axis Bold as Love better than Are You Experienced. And I started into mine, and my first 3 were pretty much set in stone. 4 and 5 for me became 25. And I looked at my first 3 and thought, what's the commonality of these 3? And my first 3, not only is it a great debut album, but it's my favorite album by that band. So my top 5 includes bands where not only is it a great debut, but it's my favorite album by that band. They never bettered themselves after that, even though a couple of these have had some other really strong albums. But I'm starting out number 5 going into the 80s in 1987 with the first gangster rap album to go platinum, the first rap album inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, and it was also enshrined in the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And that is Straight Outta Compton by NWA.
Great record.
You know, the title track, F the Police, Gangsta Gangsta, on down through the list. Just a great album that really changed music, a very influential album for its time. And NWA never topped it after that.
No, they did.
So that's my number 5. Number 4, I've talked about this album before. It was really the beginning of American heavy metal. Very influential album. If you talk to bands that came after this was the album that kind of made them decide the type, including Van Halen. And you know, another great debut album, Van Halen's debut, but not my favorite of their catalog. But you know, I talked about this album just last episode or 2 episodes ago, the Montrose album, Sammy Hagar's debut, Ronnie Montrose's first time running a band on his own, and you know, just every song on here is incredible. Denny Carmassi on drums, Bill Church on bass, Ronnie Montrose on guitar, Sammy Hagar on vocals. Of course, we know Bad Motor Scooter, Rock the Nation, Space Station Number 5, all great songs. Don't Want It, Make It Last, Rock Candy.
Rock Candy, I love that one. That's
Good Rockin' Tonight. I can't stress enough the importance of this album, not only to me, but to a lot of American heavy metal performers that came after. It's widely considered the first American heavy metal album. My number 3 is from 1978, and it could really be a greatest hits album. The band has joked about this as being sort of a greatest hits album, and might be a surprise, but The Cars debut. There's another one that, you know, these songs are all played on the radio. Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girl, Just What I Needed, I'm in Touch with Your World, Don't You Stop, You're All I've Got Tonight, Bye Bye Love, Moving in Stereo, All Mixed Up. Elliot Easton, maybe the most underrated guitar player ever.
He's really excellent.
And probably the second best left-handed guitar player we'll talk about tonight. My number 2 album, I don't own a copy of this, and I don't know why. But it's an album released in 1968. It blends country, folk, rock, classical, R&B, the blues. To me, it's got a very New Orleans feel to it. Roger Waters has said that it's the second most influential album of all time, behind Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And it caused Eric Clapton to leave Cream and pursue other music styles. It was recorded with no overdubs, and that's Music from the Big Pink by the band.
Oh, wow. Great pick.
Fantastic album. And like I said, it's got a distinctively New Orleans feel. And this was, you know, everybody knows The Weight. A lot of people know Long Black Veil that Rick Danko sang, the old traditional folk song, Long Black Veil. But to me, this really made me realize, even as a guitar player, how much the keyboards can add and the vocals. Richard Manuel's vocals on Tears of Rage and I Shall Be Released, which is one of my all-time favorite songs, along with The Weight from this album. If you listen to Richard Manuel's vocals and it doesn't bring tears to your eyes, he is the one male vocalist that you can just feel the emotion in every note. With a song like I Shall Be Released, about a man being in prison, you feel that Richard was that man in prison when he's singing the song. You can really hear the emotion in his voice. And of course, you know, Levon Helm, one of the greatest drummers ever. The band had just left touring with Dylan and, you know, moved into this house, Big Pink, in Woodstock, New York, and recorded the whole album there with no overdubs. And just an incredible album. If you haven't listened to this album, listen to it. Caledonia Mission, another great song. This Wheel's on Fire. Every song beginning to end is a great song. My number 1, there was never any doubt in my mind to this one. Another one that every song is a hit, and that's the 1976 debut from Boston.
Classic stuff, no doubt about it.
I've got the picture disc of it here. This was, say what you want, but this was Tom Scholz' project. They had to trick Epic Records. Tom had recorded this. He played basically all the instruments himself. Did have a few overdubs with some other people playing some instruments here and there. Brought his friend Brad Delp in to record the vocals, and just another incredible voice that left us too soon with Bradley Delp. This is one of those albums where every song, just the first time I heard More Than a Feeling, it just made the hairs on my arm stand up on end. Then you got Peace of Mind, Foreplay Long Time, Rock and Roll Band, Smokin', Hitch a Ride, Something About You, Let Me Take You Home Tonight. I urge you to find one song you don't know on this album.
Yeah, it's packed with hits, just like the Cars record.
Even the casual listener knows every song on this record. And Tom recorded it basically in his home, in his basement, and used, between the studio technology and the production techniques that he used, went on to be influential for years and years to come with some of the stuff he used. And a lot of it was with his MIT engineering background, analog electronics that he was using to develop different sounds. And when, you hear those, the notes on Foreplay Long Time, when those guitars come in, it sounds like there's about 12 of them playing on there. And so that's, it was never doubt about those top three on my list. So that's it. That's my top five.
Want me to throw out some honorable mentions?
Sure. What'd you think of my top five? Anything to comment on?
I cannot argue with those choices. Are absolutely unassailable. Unassailable. I can't argue with any of them. One of them's going to be an honorable mention for me. One of them. But they're just, those are all classic records. I can't find anything wrong with any of them. It's not like Motley Crue last week. Okay. I mean, it's not. So.
Yeah, throw out some honorable mentions.
I'm going to start out my first. This would have been my first one out too, and I actually do have a really beaten up copy on vinyl, and I forgot to bring it with me. It's King Crimson in the Court of the Crimson King, from 1969. Interestingly enough, for my picks, top five, were all from the same year, 1967, just to let you know. The only one that was from the 70s was the Roxy Music debut from 72. But my first one out is going to be King Crimson, 1969, in the Court of the Crimson King. Not much needs to be said about that album. It's the most influential progressive rock record of all time. There's no doubt about it. And it mixes free jazz and spacey elements, even early heavy metal, just kind of puts it all together with Mellotron as well. It's a classic record and a 10 out of 10. Another one I want to mention, going back to one that you mentioned, 1978, the Cars debut. This is on an honorable mention for me. I mean, this is just great songwriting, and it's just packed with hits. It's undeniable. These songs are catchy. It's interesting. It kind of mixes new wave and hard rock, actually. It kind of mixes would you say it kind of mixes new wave and hard rock together? And then they mix new wave and hard rock, and they write these kind of pop songs.
A lot of pop elements to it.
Yeah,
track element.
They took a lot of influence from Bowie and the Beatles, and also Roxy Music. I think were probably some of their biggest influences, but they actually are far poppier than Bowie or Roxy Music. They're more like the early Beatles in that respect. This very catchy songs, and some of them are very guitar driven, and they're just a lot of fun. But that's
foreshadows a lot of the 80s electronic sounds.
Sure. Yeah. And it's just a great, the songs are just great. And they never better this one. The Candy-O is great though too, but this is the one. Okay.
Yeah.
My next one out, well, not next one out, but another honorable mention, also from 1978 as well. Susie and the Banshees, The Scream. And I'm about to take a drink for Dr. K. I will be taking my own drink for Dr. K in a second. This record is massively influential, folks. If you haven't heard it, you need to understand the influence of this record. It's basically they took the aggression and the attitude of the Sex Pistols, slowed it down, made it sound really big and really artsy and really cinematic. Now, Susie is not totally developed her vocal chops yet. That's going to be about 3 years down the road. But the fire, the passion, it's all right there. And she's already a great vocalist, but she's going to grow from here and become, for me, the greatest vocalist who's ever existed, personally. That's what I hear. She's not that on this record. She's working her way toward it. She's only been singing for a year and a half. Incredible. Steve Severin had only been playing bass for like a year and a half. Of course, he took his name from the Severin character in Venus and Furs by the Velvet Underground. That's where Severin took his stage name. But yeah, this record is just incredible. Very cinematic, quite heavy, actually. Takes influence from the Velvet Underground and Can, early Roxy music. 3 most important tracks are Mirage, which is like the guitar by first guitar player John Mackay, is like proto shoegaze all the way. 10 years before the genre had a name, John Mackay created shoegaze on Mirage. Also, Suburban Relapse, which is very heavy track with some sax in it. And probably my favorite track on the record, Jigsaw Feeling, which is Susie taking all of her anxiety and turning it into art. Next up, 1979, Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures. This is, of course, iconic cover. Anyone who likes the Doors should like this record. Ian Curtis was very influenced by Jim Morrison and his poetry. What makes this record unique, and actually this record doesn't really exist without the Scream. It took a lot of influence from the Scream, the record I just mentioned, but Martin Hannett's really twisted production techniques really added a lot to this record. Upon release initially, Peter Hook and Bernard Sumner, later of New Order, which is more of a synth pop band, obviously. They did not like the production on this record by Martin Hannett. They thought it sounded too much like Pink Floyd. However, Ian Curtis and the drummer Stephen Morris loved the production, and Martin Hannett did get it right. This is a classic record. Disorder, also Shadow Play, and the very heavy, actually. Day of the Lords are my 3 favorite songs on the record. It's definitely a masterpiece and the best of their 2 records before they became New Order, the remaining members. My next one up is going to be very much an underdog record. 1980s, the Psychedelic Furs debut. Love this record. It took a lot of influence from both Susie and Joy Division, both. It's a great record. Steve Lillywhite produced this record, and he actually got his big break producing the first Banshees record, The Scream. Great record. Big Roxy music influence on this record as well. Sister Europe is a standout track on here.
Didn't Lillywhite do some production for U2 later on?
Yeah, he did some production for U2. Actually, Rush wanted him on, I think, Grace Under Pressure, but he abandoned the project or something. But Lillywhite got his big break on that first Susie record. That's kind of, what. So the Scream's important for several reasons, also for Steve Lillywhite's career, too. Next up is Talk Talk, The Party's Over, from 1982. This record's kind of forgotten about in their canon, but the lead single, Talk Talk's a fantastic piece of synth pop. This is actually my favorite synth pop record of all time. I think it really tops synth pop debuts from Duran Duran, New Order, and also Depeche Mode. Now, Talk Talk's going to develop into more of an art rock band as the 80s progress. By the end of the 80s with Spirit of Eden, they're what you would call post-rock, almost predicting things that Radiohead did 8-9 years later. But this is a straight-up synth pop record. The Party's Over, but it's a very, very atmospheric record. It's got one great track in Talk Talk. Some other honorable mentions I want to mention that I don't have. I already mentioned in the Court of the Crimson King. I'm going to move right into the 90s with Jeff Buckley's Grace. I don't have that, but it's a staggering. You mentioned something about emotional vocal performances before. That's about as emotional as it gets. You're not going to hear anything more emotional unless you listen to maybe Billie Holiday on record or CD or whatever. Jeff Buckley, Grace, brilliant record. You all know Hallelujah, but I implore you to check out Mojo Pen and Dream Brother from that record. Phenomenal record, 10 out of 10. Jeff Buckley's Grace. Also, want to mention the Garbage debut from 1995. That's got a lot of great songs on it. It's the debut of Garbage. They never topped that, but that was a very, very big album in the mid 90s. Got tons of airplay. They're great, catchy songs. My last honorable mention is going to be post 2000, and that's going to be the debut from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Fever to Tell, which contains the Bohemian Rhapsody of post 2000 modern rock, and of course that is Maps, which is the greatest standalone rock song recorded post 2000 in my opinion. And those are my honorable mentions.
Good choices. Some of those are going to be duplicates on my list. My honorable mentions, a lot of these I don't have. Queen's debut. Great. I don't like it as well as I do Queen 2, Jazz, some of their other ones, but it's just an incredible debut. King Crimson's Court of the Crimson King, you mentioned that. The Doors debut, you mentioned. Free, tons of sobs. My first of 2 Paul Rogers mentions in my honorable mentions. I don't really know if you can consider this a debut because there was the Jeff Beck group, but really the first Jeff Beck solo album, Truth.
Rest in peace, Jeff Beck.
Here, rest in peace. Stevie Ray Vaughan's Texas Flood, I talked about last episode. The Hendrix album that you mentioned. Robin Trower, Twice Removed from Yesterday. I don't think it's as good as the follow-up to that, but great album. Pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd. Their debut, Bad Company's debut, Ted Nugent's debut, Beastie Boys' License to Ill.
Fun record.
Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey by Bruce Springsteen. A lot of those I don't have. Now to the ones I do have. Of course, I got to mention Toto's first album. There's about 3 albums in their catalog I like better, but fantastic album. Group of studio musicians came together to form a band. Kansas's first album. This one wouldn't have been on my list 5 years ago. Actually, wouldn't have been on my list prior to our show on Kansas earlier, but I kind of fell in love with that album a little bit back then. One that means a lot to me now, the Winery Dogs. This is Richie Kotzen. Drawing a blank on their names. Richie Kotzen on guitar and vocals, Billy Sheehan on bass, and why can I never remember his name? From Dream Theater. Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater on drums. Not the progressiveness that you might expect, not the progressive rock you might expect out of Portnoy, although there are some prog rock elements to some of their stuff. It's just more, let's go out and lay down some good old blues rock from the 70s, more along those lines. A fantastic album. One you might not expect from me, but one of my favorite albums, Dr. John's debut, Gree.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Spooky album with all the New Orleans voodoo stuff to it, and I'm a big fan of anything New Orleans. Gree, Gumbo Yaya, Dance Kalinda Badoom, Mama Roo, Dance Fambeau, Croker Court Bouillon, Jump Sturdy, and I Walk on Gilded Splinters. Great album. If you haven't heard Dr. John, another rest in peace for Dr. John.
I need to check that one out.
The debut album from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Great album. Rainbow, their first album. Don't like it as well as Rising, but a great album nonetheless. Flying Burrito Brothers. Bringing some country rock with Graham Parsons, Chris Hillman, and the rest of the crew. Christine's Tune, Sin City, Do Right Woman, Dark End of the Street, My Uncle, Wheels, Juanita, Hot Burrito 1 and 2, Do You Know How It Feels, Hippie Boy. Combines psychedelia, country, rock, folk little bit of everything. And I'm a huge Graham Parsons fan. This was his band, and even the debut Graham Parsons album could be on here. Allman Brothers Band, not my favorite album in their catalog, but a fantastic album nonetheless. And of course, it's got the famous picture of them naked on the inside, sitting in the lake. Don't want you no more. It's not my cross to bear, which is probably one of my top 3 Allman Brothers songs. Black-Hearted Woman, Trouble No More, Every Hungry Woman, Dreams, and of course the classic Whipping Post brought the Allmans onto the scene. So that's it. That's my honorable mentions. I know I covered a lot there with my honorable mentions. And
yeah, great picks. There's some things I need to familiarize myself with there for sure. Dr. John is the one that kind of stands out.
Yeah.
I've never listened to before. So.
Yeah, listen to that. Very, very trippy. I think you would like it. Very, very trippy album. Lots of voodoo stuff going on in the background, and listen to it more than once, because the first time it's I gotta say it's a little frightening. I think I even talked about this album on our albums that scare us, but yeah, it's definitely worth listening to.
Oh, this is my post mention. I didn't take my drink earlier, so this is for Dr. Kelly for having the Scream as an honorable mention.
All right,
Starbucks lifestyle drink.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Any ideas what we're going to do 2 weeks from now?
If we want to do, let's do best hair metal or glam metal records, so Dr. Kelly can sell his stuff off.
Okay, we'll do that. Our top 5 hair metal.
I'm going to go right into his territory. I'm going to go out of my comfort zone, okay, and go right into Dr. Kelly territory, and I can assure you, that Motley Crue will not be in my top 5.
Is Rat considered hair metal?
Absolutely, yeah. And here, okay. If we're kind of planning ahead here, okay. But I don't consider Van Halen does not fit the criteria whatsoever. They influence the movement, but they're not glam metal or hair metal. They're not, okay. It's kind of like Rage Against the Machine was to nu metal. Big influence on it, but they're not, right?
Yeah.
Van Halen is that to glam metal. AC/DC doesn't fit that. They're a hard rock band, 70s style hard rock band. They're not. I wouldn't consider Aerosmith glam metal at any point, not even in the 80s. Def Leppard is not glam metal to me. Not any of their records. That's my opinion. I don't think they qualify. I just don't think they do. And Guns N' Roses, obviously, Appetite for Destruction is the furthest thing from glam metal. I realized that upon hearing it for the first time in Dr. Kelly's car. So those are some artists that won't qualify for me, but I'm going to pick out, classic glam metal artists and give my top 5 to see if I can stack up to the infinite fountain of knowledge on the genre. That is Dr. Kelly.
All right, sounds like a plan. So we'll plan that for 2 weeks from tonight. That would put us, what's the day today? The 19th, 26th. That would put us March 5th, if I remember right. I'm thinking right here. It puts us down for March 5th. So join us back on March 5th for our 5 favorite glam metal, hair metal albums of all time. So it ought to be an interesting one. Thanks for joining us, folks.
Thanks for watching, folks. Please like and subscribe. For Liza, do it for Liza.
And even more importantly, hopefully you heard something that you haven't heard before and you think, I want to go listen to this record, because Jeff or Jim said they liked it. So that's what we're here for, is to hopefully turn you on to some new stuff, and hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, folks. Have a great night.